Hello, edumagicians. Welcome to the Edumagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of Edumagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
Hi, I'm Steve Miletto from the Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Edumagic podcast. Today, I have with me Dr. Kris McGee from Frostburg State over in Maryland, and we connected over Christmas break-ish over this hashtag called A Book Yourself. And okay, first of all, that's just hilarious. And it's so meaningful, too. Before we get into our interview today, can you share a brief little description about what book yourself means besides the awesome hashtag?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Kris McGee here. First, I want to say that I have a writing buddy, Dr. Stephanie Affinito, out of New York. And we collaborated, again, met like you and I did over Twitter.
Yes.
And we just have this love for reading. And we said, oh my gosh, people just don't give themselves permission. And so we thought, wow, just like when you do a weight loss challenge, right? Or a workout challenge, it was like, you got to give it 21 days to get that commitment. And I said to her, what if we did a 21-day book yourself commitment to see if people would actually give themselves permission to do it? It was amazing. So we did the challenge last summer. They wanted more. So we created a Christmas one, or around the holidays. We did a book yourself for the holidays, and we're getting ready to launch, shameless plug. We're going to do one for the whole like spring break. We're going to do something for that. It's going to launch on March 29th. We're going to do, February 29th. We're going to do a Twitter chat around it, and then have this really week-long challenge for them. So it's just permission to read.
I love it. I think so many times as teachers, that's a great way for us to invest in ourselves and invest in ourselves personally and professionally. So it could be a professional book or a book for pleasure.
Absolutely. Any book they want. They can talk about abandoning books. They can do whatever they want.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, Kris, before we get into our interview, can you share with my audience a little bit about your teaching story? What got you into higher ed? What did you do before higher ed? Just give us a little brief intro into who you are as a teacher and what your journey has looked like.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'll keep it short.
Okay.
I'm celebrating my 30th year as an educator. Yay. And I started as an elementary school teacher. I have actually taught every grade from kindergarten through 5th. But my in the classroom experience was 3rd, 4th, and 5th predominantly. And then my reading intervention life was K1 and 2. And so during my time as a public educator for 23 years, I was also doing this side hustle. And I was an adjunct for Frostburg, a 14 years adjunct for Frostburg.
A 14-year side hustle. Nice.
I know. That eventually rolled into like my permanent gig. I actually finished my doctorate in May of 2012. And it was just like everything was aligned. The stars came together, the planets were in order, and a position opened at the satellite campus, which literally is about 20 minutes from my home, 5 minutes from the school I was teaching at. And I interviewed for it, nervous beyond belief. These were people I had worked with for 14 years. They had been my professors as well. I thought I was going to throw up. But yeah, I made the final cut, and I took the leap. I did a 2-year little tentative. Is this going to work? Do they want me? Do I miss my kids too much? And I decided to stay in higher ed only because I figured out a way to bring my littles with me. So I have a University Pals program that I keep littles there year round and including the summer. So it's the best of both worlds for me.
I love that. It is the best of both worlds. And can you share a little bit about what you're teaching up at Frostburg State?
Yes, so I'm officially a literacy professor, and my world, I focus on pre-service teachers. That's my biggest part of my day, but I also coordinate the Masters in Arts of Teaching program. So that's folks who want to come into the field of education. They want to be a teacher, but they're career changers. So they might be like a banker, or I've had interior design folks. Their rooms are amazing, by the way.
Sounds awesome.
But in general, I teach in my other program that I coordinate, which is the MED literacy program. So I teach in that program, I teach in my MAP program, I teach in the undergrad program, and I also teach in the doc program. So hosting, courses with technology and just in general instruction, but then being a chair, being on the other side of that is very interesting. So I'm very busy there.
It sounds like you're super busy, but I know that one of your passions to help prepare future teachers is in classroom management. And I know that that's a hard area to kind of wrap yourself around as a future teacher, because you don't know what your classroom is going to be like when you graduate. What are some strategies that you have for future teachers to take hold to when it comes to that topic of classroom management? It's so big. Yeah. What are your go-tos?
Wow. Okay. So this is a great question. And in our program, we don't actually have a class that is strictly for management because we embed it in every single course all the time.
Sure.
So, the main, I would say, if you were to ask my students, the first thing they would say about me is Dr. McGee is all about relationships. And that is true, because I feel like you can't build anything if you do not have a relationship with that child.
Yes.
So my students will feel pressure from, from their school that they have to be teaching and they have to be reading and they have to be, guided groups have to be going and math has to be, and I agree, all of that will come, but you've got to invest the time to get to know not only your students, but their families, the family structure, and just understanding all of that so that the kids feel a connection to you and they feel like it's a community that you've built together. Right. And that they can, we like to say fail forward, but they can trip, they can fall, they can make a mistake, and it's not going to be judged, and they're going to be able to figure out together or on their own, like what do they need to do to make this right. So starting with foundations, that's my number one top tip. And not for the kids not to feel pressure to have, their immaculate guided reading sections up and running on day 3 of their first school year. Good grief.
Right.
My second tip is about creating these management systems. So I model with my kids all the different things that I would do, but here's the biggest tip about it. Less is more. I feel like a lot of times kids get overwhelmed and they feel like they need to have all of these different strategies of how to manage their classroom and all of these really in-depth and convoluted systems where like everybody has a job and the job chart, you've got 25 kids, you've got 25 jobs. No, less is more. And I will tell you that I've learned a lot of things over my life as a teacher from kindergarten. My bestie teaches kindergarten, and kindergarten keeps it simple. And for the longest time, I was that teacher, and I had 25 jobs because I had 25 kids, and I was losing my mind. And so I went to my bestie, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, Kris, you're going about this wrong." She has one person in charge. So I adopted the system. I created a classroom manager. And of course, I gave them the lanyard and it had their little name on it. And my kids felt so grown up. So the only thing was I worked in Title I schools. That was my heart. It is my heart to this day. And they're absent. My kids were frequently absent. And so I had to have an assistant manager. So if the manager was absent, the assistant steps up because they're in training to be the manager anyway for the next week. But they do everything. They do all the paper passing out, the deliveries, anything that you needed done, they're your go-to. And with that, I would tag into the idea, I know teachers are all about print, and I am too, putting the kids' names around the room, but seriously, for management issues, number system. All my kids have a number. Even in my college classrooms, they have a number. And then when you do your little equity sticks, I've got my numbers on there. I never have to redo my sticks because I don't have to change the names.
Yeah, that's smart.
Everybody had a number. So, all of their little textbooks that came had their number. You match the number to the cubby, to the kid, and then it just rolls over each year easily. You don't have to worry about changing the names.
Right.
So that can be daunting. And even for bulletin boards, and I know different school systems have different policies about sharing student work. So there was a moment in time when it was a confidentiality system where I taught. And so what I did was I created brag tags, and I just took yarn and the old wooden clothespins and put my numbers, the kids' numbers on them, and I just put up their brag tags. And so my kids chose what they wanted to hang on their brag tag, and it was their number. So they could leave their name on or they could blank their name out. But it was their way of saying, this is what I want to put on the refrigerator, if you will, to share. So I think just less is more for kids in general. That would be my biggest thing, including your rules. Like having classroom rules. In my experience, it was usually each building would have like 2 rules that were non-negotiable that you had as a whole school. So we made those part of our rules, and then we would together create 3 more. So 5 rules. That was it. Prominently displayed in our classroom that we referred to all the time. If a kid was breaking a rule, we'd be like, time out, let's check it to the chart. What are we not doing? How can we help you? And so just having that grounded, I think, is really, really important. And I know we're kind of moving forward, so I'm going to go to my next tip, but I want to say, I think a whole other episode could be on class cash. Because, class cash, I get a lot of people that push back on it. Because I'm that teacher who I would pay my kids money. Well, not real money,
right.
Little tokens.
Chris bucks.
Shop, bucks. And I had a shop that they could come, and I put in it things that they were interested in, which is so funny, Sam. The hot commodity my last year in 3rd grade were, I would hang on my lanyard the little hand sanitizer bottle with the cool little fun grippy around.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my kids wanted that in the shop. Like that, I couldn't keep it in stock in my shop.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
But, class cash has its own little nuances about it. And it really is a give and take system where, I would give more than I took, but I did take away money when kids didn't follow what we agreed to be our class rules. Sure. And I feel like that gave responsibility and ownership on the student. It wasn't embarrassing. But some people will say to me, oh, you should never take away from a kid. And I'm like, dude, I need that to be the case when a policeman pulls me over.
Yeah, right.
My money, it just says, now, Chris, don't speed again.
Right. I think that should be a bonus episode, about class cash. I think that'd be awesome for my listeners, since they really like to hear a different perspective on it, with strategies attached to that perspective and how it could be successful.
I'd be happy to do that. I could talk forever on that topic. But if I can, I will move on. And
keep going, girl. You got this.
Moving on from like the management system, 3 sort of marries to it really well, and they're all interconnected. But just this idea that you really need to establish clear expectations. And I always preach to my kids, you've got to say what you mean and mean what you say. Like, you can't tell a kid, if you don't stop talking, I'm going to tape your mouth shut. You can't do that. Right. So don't say that to them, things you can't follow up and do. And sometimes kids just don't even understand what it is that they're not allowed to do. Right. And I think establishing that very clearly, I used a technique called a why chart. It's not anything like brand new. Literally chart paper, drawn the why, you draw the why. And then at the very beginning of the school year, I talked about what does it look like, sound like, feel like for every place that we had to go in the building. So it was really, my kids would fall apart like in the cafeteria, in the hallway, in our, we call them encore or special classes where they would go to music, art, PE. And so we had charts for all of them. And before we would walk to that special class, I would say, okay, what does it look like, sound like, feel like when we go to media? Because that was just hard, because being the book dealer that I am, they were struggling when their media specialist wasn't a book dealer. Sure. And they were very verbal about it. So, and
that gives them an expectation of what to expect when they're in that classroom, and moving from a space like yours into a different learning space just sets them up for success.
Absolutely. And I think, it's important because we talk about, especially in Title I schools, we talk about hidden rules, where at home there are certain rules and expectations, but when my kids come to school, the rules are different. And so just like we in life have to adjust, it's the same for us as teachers, right? When you go into a classroom, or if you're a guest in a building, like when our kids go in as interns, there are hidden rules. Where do you park? Don't park in somebody's spot that's not marked, but it's clearly marked, right? Or don't sit in someone's seat in the faculty room if it's lunchtime, because that's somebody else's seat. So learning those things, the kids are the exact same way, because school has rules that sometimes they're not clear about what those rules or expectations are. So I think it's just our job to make sure, like you said, set them up for success. Yes. And model. I am a huge fan of modeling. So when I had centers or stations or whatever you want to call them, but when my kids would move around the classroom for the beginning of the school year, that first month, I modeled what it looked like, sounded like, and felt like when they were in the comfy zone, right? Yes. Or when they went to a listening station. And that way, in the moment, if a kid forgot, we could do a timeout and we could talk about it as a group. And I explained to my students that it's really worth the time to stop in the moment at the beginning of the school year, or anytime really during the school year, and just remind them, because my kids, when they would go away for like a long weekend, if we were off for a while, if it was the holiday break, and that's like 10 days sometimes they're gone, I learned the hard way that when they come back, we got to go back to the chart and say, hey, we're back at school. Let's remember, what does it look like here? What does it look like? Because, depending upon where they've been, who they've been with, it changes. And so I just think we have to make sure we are constantly providing support, modeling, and references for them to understand what they need to do to be successful in your classroom.
I love that. And I think reminding our future teachers and our first year teachers that it's okay to have a reset in the middle of the year, especially during those holiday breaks. Like, it's okay if we come back from a holiday break or a long weekend, let's quickly review those rules and expectations. I think that's beautiful, and giving them permission to understand that it's okay.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, I love that. Thank you, Kris. What about tip number 4?
Right, tip number 4. This one I think is really important in today's world with being human. I think it's really important that we let kids see us in our moments when we're not maybe all together. I've had, it backs up on you as a teacher, stresses, and you just get overwhelmed. And so I have, yes, in 30 years, I have lost my patience. I have raised my voice. I have not been proud of that. However, in the moment, it's so important for me to step back and say to my students, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to respond that way, but let me say that made me mad, that upset me, that disappointed me. So I don't want to take away from like what I was upset about, but I want to own how I handled it. And I think that my students really need that, because a lot of them come from a home or a situation where yelling is kind of a common denominator. And they don't know any other way to respond other than, to react and be aggressive and to be upset. So it was shocking to my kids, the first time that I did like kind of lose my patience. And then that jolted me and I went, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And being human, but also being human about owning my role in that and how I delivered my anger. I don't really want to say anger, but just my disappointment probably.
Yeah. And I think it can also go the other way, being human and celebrating the joys in life as well, and letting students see kind of behind the curtain. Maybe if you have, I know there's this one, shout out to Derek Whitmer. I follow him on Instagram. He's a 3rd or 4th year teacher now, and he shares all about his dog Cooper. And I think it's really cool just to let students know that, hey, I have a really cool dog and he's super cute. And one day, one of his students, he teaches little ones as well, brought in, I think it was a Christmas gift for the dog too, and it just becomes like a part of that culture in that classroom. Like, Mr. Whitmer has a really cool dog, and, just letting them know that you're a person too, and that you don't live at the school, and, and that you have a life, and share parts of your life with your children.
I agree. And we were just talking about that, interestingly, in class yesterday. My interns were asking, is it okay to talk about my kids? And I said, oh my gosh, my son, who is currently 26 in the PhD program at University of Austin, or University.
Woo, shout out.
My students, it's so funny. On the episode that we're going to do about Class Cash, I'll talk more about it. But at the end of the year, I have an auction, and they could buy, I'm using air quotes, buy time with me or like my partner, which was my bestie in kindergarten. Or one year they said, can we buy time with Zach McGee? And I was like, oh, Lord. Yeah. And so that year he was like the top money maker. To buy time with Zach McGee.
Oh, that's funny.
We would walk the kids down to City Park. We were very close to that. And Zach was probably like 11 or 12 at the time. But yeah, so I think and I always bring Zach into my world today, even at 26, I still talk about him with my bigs.
That is cool. I like that. Woo, woo.
Okay, we're going to wrap this last one up. And I think this was probably one that I learned the hard way. I think probably all of these were ones that I learned the hard way. I think it's just saying to yourself, if it is not working, let it go.
Oh, really? We can do that? We can channel our inner Elsa and let it go?
Let it go. Right on. And I feel like sometimes kids, my interns will feel pressure, like, oh, but I've been told by like a lead teacher or someone that they should do this. And so, yeah, they'll give it a go, 150%, they'll try, but it's just not a match for the personality or the dynamic within their classroom in that year or at that moment in that year. Because sometimes, like you said, you got to recheck, restart. Things that worked before may not work anymore, especially when you're dealing with fifth graders. When I turned the corner with fifth graders, I was in fifth grade for 15 years. And when we turned that corner and they became like, ooh, the big dogs ruling the school, going to be in middle school, they got that air about them. Yeah, we had to do some adjustments on attitudes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's just really being okay with not feeling badly. It's just like quitting a book. Like, yeah, do it sometimes because we have to make it be the best fit. And in your case, when you're managing a classroom, it has to be a fit for the whole group. Right. And sometimes my kids will say, well, it's not a system that I like, but it's working for my kids. And I'm like, well, then you need to do that.
Right.
It has to be something that your kids are really embracing and that you are just, doing. It's not about you, it's about your community.
And it's having that mindset shift. It's not about me, the teacher. It's about the students that I'm serving.
Absolutely. And so I think, just to kind of wrap it all up in a bow, that there are times when we're talking about being overwhelmed, right? Yeah. That I look at all the things that we do, and sometimes things are flowing and sometimes they're not. And I'm talking about with my pre-service teachers when I'm teaching too, that I'm getting pressures from all of my people above me, that I would do this in my third grade classroom and I do this in my pre-service classrooms, where I would stop, breathe, and really just look at my kids and be happy and realize this is why I do what I do. And it just kind of lets everything else sort of fade away and lets me kind of bring back to the center why I'm doing what I do. And it's the people that are in front of me, the kids that are in front of me that I'm working with. And that's what I love. And so I can figure everything else out because my anchor is always going to be right there. And so, I tell them, I'm like, don't lose sight of your, the eye on the prize. Your students, that's your ticket. That's your prize. Don't get wrapped up in all the other stuff or the pressure, like everybody else is doing this and everybody else has done that and they've gone here and they've done. This is your journey. This is your walk. This is your path. Don't feel like you have to live up to what everybody else is doing. And don't feel like you have to Pinterestize your classroom.
Yes.
Wow. There are some classrooms on Pinterest that are amazing, but I could, even at this point in my life, I could not make it look that beautiful. But I feel like that's social media pressure I never had as a teacher, that I feel like my pre-service teachers are also up against to feel like they have to do. And I'm like, no, you have to make this a safe space for your students. That's what you have to do, a place where you can feel like they are a community, they trust, and they can fail forward. That's, I think that's the biggest thing. And that goes way back, right? It just circles back to relationships.
I love how you I was just going to say, I love how you circled back to our beginning one, our relationships. It really is about that foundation, because if you don't have that connection, that touch point with your students, nothing else is going to come easy. The content will come, but you have to get to know your students first, then work through the content, and setting up with less is more mindset. Yes. And that was spot on, because I think, like you said, we can go to Pinterest, we can go to Teachers Pay Teachers and see all these beautifully, wonderfully designed things and feel like, oh, I don't have that. I'm not a good teacher. Oh, that's so false. Do what works for you and your students.
Yes. And I think that's, again, keeping your eye on the prize, looking at what's right in front of you and feeling blessed. And it doesn't have to be everything chevron, right? It can just be these beautiful little faces in front of you, which I love. So
I love that.
And I'm a big quote person, so I always have a quote on the beginning of my agenda, and I do a quote on my podcast. And so my quote that I wanted to say for you is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which he says, "The secret of education lies in respecting the student." I mean, that's just it right there.
Yes. I love that. Thank you. I'll make sure to put that in our show notes, along with the checklist that you provided us with the 5 tips.
Sounds good. I love it.
Do you have one last tip for future teachers before we end our conversation?
I think it's just to be present, to enjoy the moment and just be present. I know that people are pushing, put social media out there to take pictures of what you're doing in your classroom or going to events. Like some of my students will go watch their kids perform if they're in a dance company or if they're a baseball player. put your phone down and take it in, because the computer, your brain will hold those memories as well as your phone will. But kids, I look across the sea of teachers sometimes, and like everybody has their phone up, and I just would say to them, try to be present. Just try to be present and enjoy it. I have loved every minute of my 30 years, and I can't wait. I'm not done. I'm not finished. So yeah, I think just be present.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Kris. This was excellent.
Thank you.
All right, friends, thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate all of you being present with us in this moment while we share some classroom management strategies for young learners. Remember, friends, you have the edumagic within you. See you next time.
And there you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.